Carleton.
So let's get this straight. When Conservatives were in power, according to him, we spent $250 million on housing, and the average house cost Canadians $450 grand. Now, with them in power, they're spending $27 billion tax dollars, and the average house costs $720 grand. So now housing is not just more expensive for taxpayers, it's more expensive for home buyers. Failing is bad, Mr. Speaker. Failing expensively is even worse. Mr. Speaker, why do we have the second biggest housing bubble in the world?
The Honourable Minister.
Can see through that partisan rhetoric, Mr. Speaker. Here are the facts. The fact is they invested $0 in COBS. They downloaded housing costs to municipalities and provinces. The reason we have a housing crisis is because they had no leadership in housing for their time in office. Here's the fact. We brought in federal leadership in housing. We've introduced the National Housing Strategy. We're working more than ever before with municipalities. And we're bringing in a first-time home buyer incentive to make sure that we're turning Canadians into home buyers.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
He seems to be bragging that he's the most expensive housing minister in Canadian history, because not only are Canadians spending more when they buy a house, now they have to pay more on their taxes for the failed programs that this minister and this government put in place to inflate the housing bubble to begin with. Canada has the second biggest housing bubble in the world, behind a tiny island in the South Pacific called New Zealand. Every other country has less housing inflation. So what is causing this massive bubble? Is it just inflation?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since the member from Carleton has referred to inflation, let's do a little bit of fact-checking of what we heard in the House earlier today. The member for Louis Saint Laurent referred to Germany having higher inflation than Canada. So I'd like to urge the honourable members to check their facts before they come into this House, because this morning Germany reported 6% inflation. The Eurozone this morning reported 4.9% inflation. Even the leader of the Conservatives has admitted he understands inflation is a global phenomenon. I wish other members of his party would listen to him sometimes.
Member for Carleton.
Well, listen, maybe the Prime Minister would listen to the Deputy Prime Minister's book, and in that book, she could explain how she has managed to create the second biggest housing bubble in the world. In fact, Vancouver has the second highest home prices on earth. Toronto is number 5, more expensive than Manhattan, San Francisco, London, England, other places with far less land, far more people, and far more money. This is housing inflation that has resulted since this government unleashed a torrent of money printing. So, will this finance minister finally tell us what is causing this housing bubble? Is it just inflation?